infidelity is a trauma.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's traumatic and it impacts your nervous system. It impacts your sense of reality. And so when I say you have to choose to trust, I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm just saying that you have to say, this is something I want. I'm going to be open to, if you want it, I'm going to be open to finding love and safety again. And here's how I'm going to build trust for myself so I can do that. I'm going to learn how to set good boundaries. I'm going to build confidence. I'm going to build a lifestyle that I like. Because if I have all of these things, somebody can hurt me, but they can't push me down. I'll be okay.
Hey, friends, welcome to The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux, a show for women in midlife who want to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Michele Lamoureux, a self-love coach and the author of Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Each week, I bring on world-class experts, best-selling authors, leading entrepreneurs, and also do solo casts with the intention of inviting you to get connected to what you really desire from your life. This show is produced with love every week. There's inspiration and actionable tips in every episode because I want to see women playing a starring role in their lives instead of living on the sidelines. Be sure to join the Good Life community newsletter over at thegoodlifecoach.com for more inspiration and tips to live your best midlife. And make sure you're following the show on your favorite podcast player. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey friends, it's Michele Lamoureux and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking about how to find love, true partnership in midlife. So if you're single, this episode is for you. And truthfully, if you are in a relationship, there's so much great information that today's guest shares that I think you're going to find really interesting and helpful as well. Joining us today is Elizabeth Earnshaw, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified Gottman therapist, clinical fellow of the LMFT, and the author of I Want This to Work, an inclusive guide to navigating the most difficult relationship issues we face in the modern age. She sees couples and trains therapists at a Better Life Therapy in Philadelphia. And she's also the co-founder at With Ours, a company focused on helping premarital couples have important conversations. So whether you're single, divorced, have lost a partner, there's so many great takeaways from this conversation. All of the questions I asked were in support of finding partnership, whatever that looks like for you or how serious or not serious you want that relationship, but finding good people and feeling good about yourself in the process. So having just finished recording the interview with Liz, I can say as a seasoned expert, she gives so much great advice. And we even share some of our own personal history from when we're younger. So I think you can't learn enough about how to cultivate a healthy relationship, whether you're single or partnered, and regardless of your age. So I know there's some women in their 20s and above who listen. I think you're going to love this conversation as well. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have anything you want to share, the best way to do that is to be a part of the Good Life community newsletter, because I email you each week and you can just send a note back to the team and share any feedback you have. We love hearing from you. Or you can comment over on Instagram. My handle there is Michele with 1L _ Lamoureux. And you can share the interview and tag me and I'll reshare. I love getting any feedback. It's really what keeps me going. Now, speaking of sharing, be sure to send this to your friends who would benefit from listening. And before we jump in, I just want to mention that Liz has been on the show before. We talked about how to navigate conflict within partnered relationships, what leads to divorce, what causes stressors, how to improve communication. And you can actually find that interview in the show notes. The link will be there as well. So be sure to check that out after you tune into today's conversation. On that note, let's get into the show. Here we go. So, Liz, where I want to start today is something I read in your book. You wrote that when you grew up, you wanted to find love. And I thought that was really sweet. It's funny. I don't know if you watched the J-Lo behind the stories video about her new album, but like that was her goal too. And I thought it was sort of interesting because I think a lot of us think about, oh, I'm going to get up and grow up and I'm going to get married. But love is more specific. And you said, you dated a couple guys that didn't work out. You went to school and you learned a lot of stuff that most of us don't know. And you
Mhm.
did find that love. So I
Mhm.
kind of want to start here because what can we learn from you about, it doesn't matter if we're in a committed relationship or looking for love, although this is really more focused on people who are single and looking for that loving partnership. But what can we learn? Because obviously we're not going to go get, a master's or PhD in psychology. So teach us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much that I've had an opportunity to learn just through what I do with people every single day, not just the master's degree, but getting to work with people every day. It's hard to even distill sometimes. I was actually just talking to somebody about this right before, and we were talking about how some of this starts to be so integrated that we don't even realize how much we know or how much we're
Yes.
aware of. And that sometimes we'll share something with someone or something will come up in conversation, and the other person will be like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. And we're like, oh, I forgot. That's because I'm with this all of the time.
Right.
Um, I think one thing that really comes up a lot and that helped me a lot in my own life is, and this is so duh, but really this idea of you don't really have power to change other people. And I would say that that's one of the biggest themes that comes up with the singles I work with and with the couples that I work with.
Yeah.
And I think we know that in an intellectual level. Like everybody could say that to their friend. You can't change them, that's how they are. But really being able to internalize and sit with that reality, I think has been one of the most powerful things for myself. And I think for clients that I work with as well.
Totally. But was that what you went into when you met your husband, or was there more beneath that?
Yeah, in terms of what I went into when I met my husband,
Yes. Like, did
but
you change something about yourself or how you were approaching the dating scene?
I did change things about how I was approaching the dating scene in a big way. And um, I think I wrote about this in the book, which is funny because it's from a few years ago, so I kind of forget some of the things that I say. But one of the things that I changed is I started to think about this as being an interesting experience where I'm getting to know somebody, and that it wasn't about the end game anymore. I wasn't going into it with, I've got to marry somebody. I was going into it with, I want to learn about this person and who they are. And I want to see if I'd really like to be in a relationship with them. I think before that, I was very much like, how do I appeal to somebody else? What can I do to get them to like me? And that changed for me before I met my husband.
That's so good. What you just said is like so relatable because I remember me in my 20s. It's like, will they like me? Do they like me? What do they think about me? Well, what do I think about them? It's not that I was totally not thinking about that, but there was more of a focus on how I was being received versus, and especially when I was like first starting dating in my 20s, it was like really trying to accommodate and I wasn't fully showing up as me.
For sure. And I think that's interesting what you said about, of course, I noticed them. I knew what I liked about them or didn't like about them. It's not that we like anybody that comes through the door in
Right.
those periods of time. But
Yes.
I think what happens is that we can easily become, um, it's the honeymoon phase. So we can become idealistic about a specific trait about them that we like. And because of that, we don't see anything else. And then we try to appeal to that trait that we like, right?
Yes.
They might have a lot of things going on that are likable or unlikable, but they're very funny or they're outgoing. And, so now I want to be outgoing or I want to, they're into athletics. So now I want to care about sports. And
Totally.
um, so the thing that attracts us in those times, we start to wonder, are they going to be attracted to me through that? And can I appeal to them? And
Yes.
even if it means changing myself.
Yes. And midlife women listen to the show, but I know there are some younger women that listen. So I'm going to say something that I think maybe will relate on based on what you're saying too. Yes, when I was younger, it was like I always had so many interests and would take the classes, but it's easy. And I've worked with this as a life coach with clients too, where you see women just drop everything for the relationship and they give up their own interests. But I think midlife women, they don't do that. They know, because like now we don't care as much about what other people think. There's something happens because I'm 53. Something happens. For me, it happened over 50. Some women say it happens over sometime in their 40s. For me, it was in my 50s where you're like, you just like wake up, you're like, I really just don't care what other people think. I really care about me. Let's talk about me. I want to focus on me. What do I want? What do I need? And like your priorities shift. It's sort of funny.
It is funny. One thing I have found with women who are, 50 plus is sometimes they still have some friction with that, where I think they intellectually feel that sometimes, but then when they want a relationship, I think there's obviously, we're talking to a group of people who have many different desires. So there might be someone who's in their 50s or 60s who wants to be single. And they're like, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm really kind of grounded with that. And that's okay. There might be somebody in their 50s who's like, I want a relationship, but I'm cool with being single and, whatever. But what I found is that no matter the age, sometimes when you meet somebody you really like and you've been feeling lonely, that grounded sense that you might have been embodying for the last 20 years or working on, it can still go out the window no matter how old you are. And I've worked with a lot of women who are, in their 50s or 60s, and they're dating someone and they come in and they'll say, I don't even know how I got into this. Like, I like my life. I have my grown children who I'm close to and my own place. And now I'm in my 60s and I'm dating a jerk. And like, how did I get to the point where I'm like letting somebody treat me this way? So it's interesting because I do think there's like a different sense of self and awareness. And I think that no matter the age, it can still get messy and difficult when you're wanting love and when you're feeling lonely.
This is so good. I could not agree with you more. As you're saying that, I'm literally just shaking my head. Yes, this makes so much sense because there is that sense of vulnerability when you're putting yourself out there and, your people know you. And maybe if you were married, your partner, your ex-partner, they knew you and you didn't have to sort of reintroduce yourself to somebody and go through all of that. And that takes a lot. And so I could see how what you just said could happen. I'm curious though, so I read, like I had another therapist on once and we were talking about, it was about attachment styles, specifically like an anxious attachment style and how sometimes we're attracted to what is it? The avoidant. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, she said, we were both sharing how we had been in a relationship with a narcissist when we were younger and the pain that brings. And, she said, a lot of times, though, you're doing your work in the relationship. So let's say somebody kind of did a lot of that work and now they're no longer with that partner. Are they likely, if they don't continue to do that work on themselves, to attract in a new package that same dynamic, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be the same, but then suddenly it is? Does that happen often? Like, what do they need to know about entering a new relationship? In terms of like their stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think something that's interesting is that humans are always evolving. And so there's never a perfect answer to this. And I'm thinking of multiple people I've worked with as I'm giving this answer. And I'm thinking there's like no straightforward answer other than I can say that one of two things happens. Either you still struggle with that dynamic and you keep modeling that dynamic in your life. So you have always kind of struggled to maybe if somebody's pulling away or you're not sure if they like you, you struggle to self-soothe. And because of that, you pursue them and you become anxious. And even if they're not being nice to you, you might still go on a date with them or whatever it is. So you might repeat that with your ex and you might repeat it with the new person. Some people, though, on the other hand, they become reactive to what happened to them in the past and they become the opposite of what they were. And so I actually have worked with a lot of people where they were like, you know what? If I said to them, is this similar to what happened in your past relationship? They'll be like, you know what? No. I was the pushover in my past relationship. I was anxious. We got married when we were in our 20s and I did whatever they wanted and they could disappear for 3 weeks with their friends. And I would just be, sitting by the door with the babies and wondering where they are. And I wouldn't yell at them and da 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 da. And now I'm not like that at all. We'll talk and it's like, well, are you empowered now? Or are you still anxious, but you're doing it in a different way? And sometimes it'll be anxious in a different way, which is like, I'm falsely empowered. I'm avoidant. I steamroll. I don't consider the other person's feelings. And so it's interesting. Sometimes we repeat, sometimes we do the opposite, and sometimes we become like what I consider fully empowered, which is not false empowerment, not one-upping, not grandiosity, but like I feel good about myself. I can ask for what I need. I can express what I think. I can say yes and no. And that's the hope of where you get. But sometimes we're in the other areas.
Okay. Talk to us about chemistry, because I think sometimes when there's too much chemistry initially, sometimes you totally miss red flags, especially when you're younger. I don't know if that happens as much, and probably it does. And maybe it's like what we're talking about. Like, okay, so talk to us about what is chemistry? Because I know from experience that you can have chemistry with people who are really not good for you. So what kind of red flags do we look out for? Like, how do we approach that? And that's probably part of the honeymoon phase where everything just feels sort of exciting. But gosh, if there's like that energetic chemistry though, that's tricky stuff. That's tricky business because that feels great.
It feels great. And I think, especially if you were in a past relationship that felt boring or, you weren't desired, it wasn't fun anymore, you were just kind of roommates, that can feel really great if you've been missing that for a long time. So in the beginning stages of a relationship, we all know it's called like the honeymoon phase or whatever you want to call it, but you start to be really hyper focused on what feels good about the other person, because your hormones are wanting you to connect with somebody. And so all of these happy chemicals are dumped into your body, and they make you think this is great, this is exciting. It's like a drug. So you feel maybe more energetic than you did in the past. Maybe you feel sexier, maybe you feel more attractive. And that actually can be a really, really good thing if this is going to be a healthy partner for you, because it creates a base of really good memories. Like things get hard and you can say, oh, we like had the best time. I know we can be like that. Like you said, though, sometimes it can make us miss red flags. And that's because we become myopic, which means we become hyper-focused on specific things and we don't see the whole picture. And we're in such a state of rose-colored glasses. It's called positive sentiment override, that we override the negative with all the positive. So we're constantly thinking, yeah, it is kind of weird that when their kids are over, they don't text me for an entire week. But, it's because they're a really good dad. And that's why they don't have time to text me over the week. It's like, yeah, I'm a mom and I can still get back to people.
Totally.
And so you start to say this bad thing happened, but look at all of this good. And so if you're dating and you're in that phase, you want to watch that. How often are you saying, I've been asking them why I'm never brought as the partner to the wedding for the last 6 months. And they always just say it's because like their friends aren't ready to meet me or people might be jealous. But like, it's just because they're such a good friend or because they're so sensitive to their ex-wife or whatever it is. And I know, but if you're coming up with a lot of those and you're always having to excuse the negative with a positive, that's when you're going to be missing red flags.
Okay. This is so good. And so, it's just interesting. Like I said, I'm sort of thinking about my own experiences too. So I've been in a partnership. I think we're going on 23 years this summer. And everyone knows relationships have like, ebbs and flows and work to do. Like it's a commitment to partner. Um, and I think that, when you are in a situation where you're trying to put yourself out there and you want things to work, you want to feel like, okay, like we were talking before the mics went on about all the things happening in our house. You had all these horrible things happen in your house. It's like, but I'm a good person. Good things should just happen to me.
Why?
So, right. So I think there's this feeling like you go out, with like a great attitude and you just want to feel like I'm going to meet somebody who's emotionally healthy and able to do this. But do we attract what we are, or do we just attract and then we navigate? Like, is it the latter? You're shaking. Yeah.
Feel like we just attract. I mean, I think that it's like there's probably something to the idea of we attract where we are at some level.
Yes.
I do believe there's some level of we attract like the same level of emotional maturity to some degree. You might be a little bit more emotionally mature, a little less, but I think we just attract. And then I think the chemistry and the interactions and all of that, they play out because of where we're at with our own self-awareness and our own healing and the other person, what they're bringing in, that impacts it. But like I don't think just because you've struggled in the past, you're walking around and like you're only going to attract people who are struggling. But the
Right.
question is, who do you feel most comfortable with? And do you allow yourself to feel comfortable with people who are healthy and functioning in the way that they relate with other people?
Totally. It does make me think, though, the more work you do on yourself, the more strength within yourself you'll have, even to walk away, even if there's crazy chemistry or you're
Exactly.
right. You're like, you know what? Okay, I've done this dance. I deserve better. Sure, I had a little fun. And you started off in the beginning. Everyone's looking for something different. Somebody might want to fall in love and get married again. Somebody might just want some really lovely, committed partnership where they can feel safe and know that it's, monogamous or, it's a safe relationship that they can grow in. And others might just want to have some fun for a
Mhm.
little while, right? I mean, I think is part of it just knowing what you want when you're getting out there.
I think so. And I think what you were just saying was important, which is that I think what you were saying is we can attract anybody. So you can have a really difficult person come into your life. You can have people who are going to bring ease into your life. And the more aware you are of yourself, the more you're going to be able to say, that is not something I want in my life based off of what you want in your life, right? So if you want calm, if you want monogamy, if you want commitment, and you really can feel grounded in that, you go on a date and the person is giving you the signs that that's not what it's going to be, you'll feel confident to say, it was so nice to meet you. You seem like a great person. And this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And you're not going to give those overriding comments I talked about earlier, where you're like, well, I want a
Mhm.
relationship. Like they're really nice. And maybe once we get to know each other, they'll change their mind about the fact that they don't want to get married again and da 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 da. You won't be doing that anymore because
Yeah.
you're going to feel good enough and confident enough about what you want to just be able to say, it's what I want. And I don't need to explain it. I don't need to make excuses for it. It's just what I want.
Yeah. I want to address something that I've heard other women who are single in midlife, who may be divorced or lost a partner or something like that, where they feel like within friend groups, it's hard to navigate too, because so much of the world can feel like it is coupled. Having
Mhm.
that date, if you want, to go out, to go to the wedding, and so any advice for, women who are feeling like maybe they're recently divorced and suddenly their relationships have changed because maybe the friend groups have chosen their partner over them, or their own friends don't know how to navigate their single friend. They felt more comfortable when they were married, like they were, it like maybe brings up some of their stuff.
It's really hard, when somebody is newly single and all of their friends are married or whatever, in different phases of their life. Um, you're going to have a new agenda in your life. And the agenda you had before fit with who was in your life. And that might have been my agenda is to be a part of my family. And so I spent a lot of time with my in-laws, and that's what I do on holidays. And now you don't have that anymore.
Mm.
Or my agenda is to have all of these friends who have kids, and like we don't go out to meet people. We don't go out to meet guys or whatever. We're taking our kids on trips and da 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 da. And now you have a different agenda, and your friend's agenda might not have changed. And that can be really, really hard. You might have people that love you deeply and say, I want to be there for you. But the way they want to be there for you is the way they could be there for you before. And you're thinking, I need someone who wants to have fun. Like, who's going to go on vacation with me now? None of you can go with me. You're too busy. Or I want to go out to dinner with some friends and they're all out to dinner with their spouses. And it's hard. And I think that part of it is allowing yourself to grieve that that's part of the loss
Mm.
too. It's not just the loss of the relationship, it's the loss of a lifestyle, and the change to a new lifestyle. And that takes time. It takes time to build a new lifestyle.
Wow, that's really profound what you said. And I feel like, gosh, like I said, I'm in my partnership for so long, but I'm feeling what you said, like feeling for like that's a hard place to navigate. Any soothing technique, like what would you recommend if a client came in and said, I'm really having a hard time? What kinds of advice do you give them?
I think the first place to start is, okay, well, like, let's talk about the hard time. And can you actually feel what that feels like to have this hard time? Sometimes we want to just solve things. And so a lot of people, I think this is hard, no matter if it's a divorce or a breakup or what, but it's like everyone around you wants to throw solutions at you. Oh, why don't you just get on Bumble and like find a friend and you can go out? Or have you tried online dating? Or why don't you just pour yourself into something else? Like start exercising every day or whatever it is. And that stuff can feel helpful sometimes, but I think most of the time that's a way for us to not sit with what this feels like first.
Mm.
And so in therapy, not necessarily in your friend groups or anything, but a
Yeah.
lot of it is being able to say, like, I actually don't have the answer for you. The only thing I have to say is that for anyone that is going through this, it sucks and it's really hard. And everything you're feeling makes sense. It makes sense that you're upset with your friends for not finding a flipping babysitter so that they can go to the bar with you on Friday so that you can have some companionship. It makes sense that you are frustrated that you lived in a big, beautiful house and now you're in an apartment, or that you're taking care of a big, beautiful house by yourself. And now these things, they make sense. And like, let's talk about what that's been like for you and
Mm.
how things have changed. I always start there with people. And then once they can kind of explore that a little bit, it's like, okay, but like, so what do you want this life to look like now? I can't tell you. I can't tell you, what worked for me, like just pouring myself into like working out or working or what that worked for me. What worked for my mom was, spending a lot of time with her kids. Like what works for everybody is different, but like what will work for you? And sometimes for people, especially after a long relationship, that might be the first time they've really sat and thought, what is going to work for me in my life? I don't just have to do what everybody thinks I should do. Maybe I don't actually want to date. Maybe I don't want this job anymore. And really being able to think, what do you want your life to look like now?
I love this. This is so good. I love everything you shared. And it's true, it could be a new beginning and it can be exciting and also probably terrifying and all sorts of emotions that need to be reckoned with, and probably I would think, it probably is good to maybe work with a therapist to get that support so that a friend who might not be able to relate or understand, you don't have to worry about that with that part of, that level of your friendship. You go to somebody who's really there for you and can help you
Yeah.
navigate that space. What about somebody who's lost a partner? So,
Yeah.
I know women, yeah, they've lost their spouse unexpectedly. Or others it was cancer or something, but others it's like a heart attack and like suddenly you had this life and it's gone. I feel like
Yeah.
that adds a whole other layer because you may have been in a relationship that was working with somebody you loved and it's
Yes.
gone.
Yeah.
Advice for those women, because I mean, that's, I'll just let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very painful in the sense of loss and grief and shock. And, I think unless you're 100, any death of your spouse is like unexpected. It's like
True.
whether they got, hurt in a car accident or had cancer, like that is not what you expected. You got married thinking you were going to be together forever. Um, and then, there might be a lot of anger because you're like, actually, we weren't a couple who got divorced. Like, we didn't choose this. This is something that happened to us. And so I'm stuck with this huge life change that wasn't a decision made by me. And
Yeah.
that can be really disorienting and bring up a lot of feelings, rage, confusion, disbelief, all sorts of things. Um, and I think that when we talked about the people around you, like a divorce is challenging, but a death is really challenging because people avoid that and it becomes taboo. And so no one talks to you about it. Like if you get divorced, your friends are like, if you have close friends, they're like, oh, we need to go out and celebrate that you're a free woman or whatever it is. But when people have a spouse die, people disappear, they don't say anything, they get awkward about it. So you feel really alone and you feel alone as time goes on. People are there for the first 2 weeks, and then no one's there afterwards.
Mm.
So it's hard. I think, one thing when it comes to the point where they start thinking, I might want companionship again. Um, that's even a hard decision to make because there's guilt. And even if they know in their minds, it's okay. I don't need to live my life alone. It's okay if I have companionship. There's still the other part of them that feels loyal to the person they love. And,
Oh,
should I continue to live and be happy? It's not fair. Or would this hurt them if they knew? If there's kids in the equation, that's a whole other layer. Will this upset my kids? So there's just so many layers and there's so much, I think, agonizing pain and decision making and loneliness and all sorts of things. I mean, go to therapy if this happens because it is really, really hard and it can be really lonely.
yeah. Support's essential. And people disappear. Why? Because they're uncomfortable with death.
Yeah, I think, this is something I talk to people a lot about when they've had a spouse die. I think some of it is people are uncomfortable with death. I think some is that some people are actually comfortable with it. And unfortunately, sometimes the griever gives, um, it accidentally gives a vibe that they don't really want people to ask. And they don't realize they're giving it, right? But like somebody might be like, I would love to bring you dinner tonight. And they're like, you don't know, I just want to be by myself. But then they're coming into therapy and saying, nobody wants to be there for me. I'm always alone. Da, 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 da. And so sometimes I push them a little bit to like, well, what message have you really given people? Because they can't read your mind. And some people are totally okay talking about it, showing up. And they're not sure what your boundary is here. You're not really being clear about that. So some people I think would be there.
Yes.
They feel shut out or they feel kind of confused. Like this has even happened to me in my own life where, I'm like, okay, am I messaging them too much? Am I like, do they want anything? And it's hard to ask for what you need. So something when somebody's grieving is I'm like, I know it's hard to tell your friends, I want you to come over every Friday for the next month so I'm not alone. Like that feels weird. And can you do it? And if they say no, then we can complain about them and
Yeah.
say,
Or
what an
say
awful
twice a month, or I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just making
Negotiate.
something up.
No,
But
I
like,
know. I get it.
saying to your friend, can you check in on me? Can you send me a message every day to see how I am? Or would you be open to and if then they're not there for you, then we can complain about them. But if you're not asking, you're not letting people know, then they just don't know. People usually just they don't know
No.
what to do.
Yeah. I think that makes so much sense. And it makes me think of friends who have had cancer and you want to support them 1,000,000%, but you also want to give them their privacy and their space. And it's sort of like yes, the more somebody can say, this is just what I need, I think people are so willing,
to do.
especially if it's a good friend. Yeah, they want to, like you said, you've been in that, like, am I texting too much? Am I not texting enough? Like, and probably each person is different. Some people might really need that space and that privacy, and others may really need more people checking in, even if it's just a text or something. So I think that makes so much sense. So what about infidelity? How does
Mm.
somebody re-enter and trust another guy or partner, depending on their preference, if
Mhm.
they've had an infidelity, which could, damage self-esteem and just, a sense of like what's true in the world? How do they re-enter that space?
Yeah, I mean, infidelity totally warps your sense of what's real, especially it, based on how long you were in the relationship where there was infidelity, I think. Like if you were with somebody for 30 years and you find out that there was infidelity, you're like, oh my gosh, I could know somebody this well and they could still hurt. Like we've lived together, we've had children together. This person has wiped my butt after a surgery, and yet I still didn't even know. Like, who are
Yeah,
they? And
right.
so, how could I ever know when I'm dating somebody who they are? It's scary. Um, and this is like an annoying thing to hear, but trust is unfortunately a choice. And you can never know truly if someone is going to break your trust. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
you can make good enough guesses
Yeah.
over time as you pay attention if they have trustworthy behavior. But you can never know if someone you could be that this is scary to hear. You could be with a trustworthy person who never did anything, and 15 years into a relationship, they could betray you.
Yeah.
You could be in a relationship for a month and be betrayed.
Yeah.
So trust at the front of it is a choice. And then, so if you make the choice, I'm going to trust people, then how do you navigate what that feels like to trust people? And it's going to feel uncomfortable. When you get the anxiety or you feel shut down and you get flooded, what do you do so that you can stay in that space, trying to trust while also protecting yourself? It's a
Mm.
dance. You don't want to be like, I'm going to trust everybody and, they can do whatever they want. But I'm listening to myself, but I'm also allowing myself to lean in a little bit. What am I seeing here? What am I noticing? But you have to decide, I'm going to try to trust people again. And then
Yeah.
when feelings come up, I'm going to do something with those.
Yeah. Why do people, this is probably a broader topic, but why do people cheat from your experience?
All sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, I'm trying to think of most of the people I've worked with where there's been infidelity. It's usually not what I would think pop culture thinks. It's usually not that they saw someone that was just so hot they couldn't control themselves or something
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Um, that happens sometimes. Sometimes there's like I went with the guys and got drunk and did this stupid thing in Vegas or something. That's more rare. Usually, it has to do with um, for the person who betrays. There's some sort of like internal tension for them. And it could be about the relationship. It just could be about themselves, right? So like, am I still attractive? Or I'm really stressed out and I don't know how to navigate it in this relationship, or I've lost my freedom, so I want to find freedom somewhere else. Sometimes it's I'm angry at you and so I'm blocking you out, but I'm not really ending the relationship. I'm ending the relationship, but not verbally. And so now I'm going to find somebody else. But I would say the majority, it's some sort of internal tension, conflict within themselves um, that they unfortunately solve in a very avoidant way. They
Yeah.
don't they don't talk to their partner and say, this is what I'm coming up against. They don't go to a therapist and say, this is what I'm coming up against. They avoid the real tension and then they act to soothe it and it blows their lives up.
Yeah. It blows it up. It blows it up. And I think what you said about going and trusting is important. And my very first relationship was in college. I was cheated on, and it sort of, and I went in so trusting, and I'm like, oh, I thought relationships were so different than this. This kind of sucks. Like, this hurts. Like, this really sucks. And so, dating again, it was like, I'll never make that mistake again. Like, but being able to put yourself out there is hard initially. And then you, like you said, you just,
And
it's hard to
then,
go into a relationship without allowing any try, like that. It's hard to connect that way.
yeah, I think it's easier the more you trust yourself because then you realize it's not really about the other person. It's about how you think you'll cope with what the other person does to you.
Yeah.
So, if you're afraid I can't date again because I'll be cheated on, yes, of course you don't want to go through that. That's devastating. And if that's blocking you from working towards companionship that you desire, your fear is actually that you can't cope with what they'll do to you. If you
Yeah.
feel like I can cope with it, I think that was I was cheated on. And I think that was like a huge shift for me is I was like, I dealt with it. If this person does something to me that is hurtful, guess what? I've got a career I like, I have friends I like, and I can cope with it. And so when you trust yourself, then it's easier to trust other people.
Absolutely. I think it would be harder in a long-term relationship, like like a marriage or like a true
Yeah.
partnership, especially if there's kids involved. But 100% in my 20s, it was like, okay, it'll be bye. We'll move on.
It's when kids are involved in, and then you have to decide, how do I still navigate this person having to see them all the time or deal with them
True.
hurt me so badly.
Right.
And I mean, infidelity is a trauma.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's traumatic and it impacts your nervous system. It impacts your sense of reality. And so when I say you have to choose to trust, I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm just saying that you have to say, this is something I want. I'm going to be open to, if you want it, I'm going to be open to finding love and safety again. And here's how I'm going to build trust for myself so I can do that. I'm going to learn how to set good boundaries. I'm going to build confidence. I'm going to build a lifestyle that I like. Because if I have all of these things, somebody can hurt me, but they can't push me down. I'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. You get the strength within yourself. Um, any advice you can give in terms of how to meet people? I know that's not really what you do as a therapist, really, but what have you seen is successful? I think a lot of women probably don't want to go on dating apps, but maybe they are. I don't know what there is in midlife these days. Like, I don't,
The people that I work with right now that have met somebody have met them organically.
yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I think dating apps can help too. I think I've heard people be successful with matchmakers, but I've heard a lot of people that just start to live their lives and they end up meeting someone because they were on vacation somewhere and they were sitting next to each other on a beach chair and they start chatting about the fact that they both recently got divorced or that they have kids the same age. They meet somebody on a work trip. I think that the goal isn't, I'm going to meet somebody, though. The goal is, I'm going to live my life. And if I live my life and I put myself in places where I like to be, then maybe there will be other people there that I like to connect with, whether they're friends or partners. But I'm going to be living my life for me. Um, I think that's what I've seen when people have met somebody.
You know what I love about this? You just sort of ended where we started because I asked you, what did you do differently after you got trained and you got your
That's
master's? And you said, I'm going to approach this as I'm going to get to know people and see what feels good and like see where it takes me without these like huge expectations. I'm going to be clear about what I want, but I'm also going to be open. So I love that. Is there anything I didn't ask you today that you think is worth mentioning? It's a big conversation. We could do like 10 episodes on this, Liz,
good.
right? Like literally. Yeah.
Good. I think that you covered everything. I think the biggest takeaway is when I've worked with people who are midlife is that if you can continue to build your sense of self, your confidence, all the wisdom you have, that is what's going to set you on a path of feeling fulfilled in life. And the other things, they'll happen in a way that works for you. But you have the wisdom, you've had the life experience, and you're really often in a place where you can kind of choose, what am I going to do with my life now? And where do I want it to go? And really kind of grounding into that and being proud of yourself for everything that you've worked through and you've been through, and leading with that pride.
Beautiful. I love where this went and everything that you've shared. Liz is the author of I Want This to Work, which was out a few years ago, but I'm so glad I discovered you. I found you on Instagram, Liz, and I'm like, I love everything you share. And you can follow Liz online. Give us your handles and where people can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Liz Listens. You can find me on my website, which is my name, so ElizabethEarnshaw.com. And I actually have another book coming out in a couple months. It's available for pre-order now, actually.
Wait, we should be talking about that book. What's this? What's your next book?
We can talk about it another time. It's called Stress Do Us Part. It's about how stress in our lives causes a lot of conflict in long-term relationships when life starts to get real. We have kids and deaths and debt and all sorts of stuff, and how sometimes that's the thing that breaks us apart because we don't know how to manage it. And so if we can learn to manage it, it can help us to stay connected.
Okay, this is fantastic. Yes, you should definitely come back on to talk about that book. All of the show notes for today will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com with all the handles. It's also on your podcast player. And this episode will be thegoodlifecoach.com/306. You can just go directly to the website and find all the links. Thank you for the work that you do in the unique, beautiful way, heart-centered way that you show up, Liz. I love being with you. It's such an honor. And thank you for what you shared today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michele Lamoureux or the company.